Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video on my channel. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com, and I wanted to talk to you guys today about the state of the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line position as we head into the NFL draft and some of my concerns about it. So I'm recording this on April 11th, so that means the draft is a little over 2 weeks away. That being said, that likely means that the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line group that they currently have is the one that they are going to head into the draft with. At this point, I wouldn't expect any big signings along the defensive line to change the trajectory of the defensive line. At this point, a lot of those free agents that are still out there are going to wait till after the draft to see what their market looks like, because there could be some teams where defensive line doesn't fall quite right on their board and they still have a hole at the position after, and then those free agents that are still out there become hotter commodities because more teams are in need and there's no draft now to look forward to try and fill those needs. Like Melvin Ingram, I know a lot of people have asked why he hasn't been signed yet. He's probably going to wait till after the draft, and he might even wait till after training camp, but that's because he can, and he knows he's going to have suitors regardless, and we do know that the Kansas City Chiefs are one of those suitors. In fact, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if most agents are just telling their players, their guys, to say, hey, I'm going to wait till after the draft until I sign, because they could land themselves a little bit more money. Like I said, if a few teams still have that need on their team and no one to fill it, and they see a solid veteran still out there, then their market might be a little bit hotter than it is right now. So with that being the case, here's where their defensive line stands heading into the draft. At defensive end, we have Frank Clark, Mike Dana, Joshua Kando, and that's pretty much it. Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed they did not make one veteran signing to add to this group. Not saying they still can't. You can refer back to my point that I made at the beginning of the video. I'm sure they might still sign a veteran, particularly after the draft. But I was a little bit surprised they did not jump in on the defensive end market at all, and I'm a little bit disappointed. I know it was a lot of guys going for big money, but that's just the nature of the position. You have to be able to spend money. You have to be willing to spend money to get someone on the edge that truly makes a difference, and for whatever reason, the Chiefs decided we're not going to get in on that. And with the Tyreek Hill trade, now being what it is, the Chiefs have a ton of cap space, but it's unfortunate that we couldn't have found out about that sooner, because then they could have used some of that cap space to go out and sign a true answer at the defensive end position, because right now the only move they've made is restructuring Frank Clark and bringing him back another year. And honestly, you can make the argument that the Chiefs don't have a single starter on the roster. I think Clark should be a backup at this point in his career. Bringing him back, that shouldn't be like, hey, he's one of our starting defensive ends. I think you could look to upgrade both starting defensive end spots, because right now your starting defensive ends are Mike Dana and Frank Clark. To me, that is simply not good enough. Looking at defensive tackle, that position is in a little bit of better shape. You still got Chris Jones, who's one of the best interior pass rushers in the league. Taylor Stallworth, the recent signing from the Indianapolis Colts, figures to be the Jerron Reed replacement. Seems to have some pretty solid reviews coming over from Indianapolis. And then you still have Treshaun Wharton, Colin Saunders, and Derek Nottie. That's a solid group. However, I don't think it should preclude the Chiefs from upgrading if they find someone that were to hit the free agent market still, or is available to them in the NFL draft. There are a lot of athletic interior defensive linemen that could actually instill fear in an offense and be a awesome duo with Chris Jones on the inside, like Devontae Wyatt from Georgia, Travis Jones from Connecticut, my guy Perry and Winfrey from Oklahoma. I would be intrigued with any of those guys. I know a lot of you don't think they should take an interior defensive lineman, and that's fine. They still need to address edge more, but with how many picks they have, they could still do both. And honestly, I don't really care where the pressure comes from as long as they get it. And again, giving Chris Jones a legit pass rushing partner on the inside would be a great luxury. Considering what Brett Veach had to say at the beginning of the offseason about the defensive line, and how it would be a group of focus for him, he hasn't done a whole lot to improve it. Now, they have all this draft capital that they can use to try and improve it, but as you guys know, some of you that have been following me, you already know, I am concerned about this approach because if we take a deep dive into Brett Veach's draft history, which I will actually do in a minute, he does not have a great history of addressing defensive line. And I just think addressing any position in general, let alone defensive line, solely in the draft is a risky approach, especially since the Chiefs have picks at the back end of a lot of these rounds. It's really hard to find like year one immediate production type of talent at pick 29 and 30. Like if they're going to take an edge in round one, pick 29 and 30, it's not a great place to be choosing if you really want a year one impact defensive end or someone on the defensive end or defensive line like that. I recently did a video with Michael Darcy of KC Sports Report talking about the possibility of the Chiefs trading up. If they did this to grab someone they really liked on the defensive line, I would understand it, even though I don't love trading up, especially with how many holes this Chiefs team has. I would get it if it meant they really get someone they like on the defensive line that could be a true impact, like maybe a future star. Like, for example, Kayvon Thibodeau is someone who's talked about as maybe dropping in the first round. Now, I'm not saying I believe that. He could, though. And if he does, if he gets to like pick number 10 and the Chiefs say, hey, you know what, we got to trade out. This guy's a generational talent, I would understand it. And a pass rushing duo of Kayvon Thibodeau and Chris Jones sounds pretty intriguing to me. And then you would still have picks to try and improve the defensive line even after that. But as I was saying, I was talking with Michael Darcy, and I'm saying, well, at pick 29 and 30, if they stay put, and let's assume that they do, it's not a great place to be picking. And I pointed to last year, the Baltimore Ravens, the first round pick that we traded them for Orlando Brown, which was pick number 30, was used to take Jason Oweh. Now, Jason Oweh is probably one of the better case scenarios for the Chiefs at pick 29 and 30, a player like that. Last year, Jason Oweh was a solid starter for the Ravens and had 5 sacks. But is that good enough? If the Chiefs come out of the draft with a defensive end, the talent level of Jason Oweh, and gives them 5 sacks in year one, is that good enough? Is that good enough to say, hey, you know what? I'm happy with the job that Brett Veach did to fix the defensive line. I'm not so sure. Because Brett Veach was talking big at the beginning of the offseason. And are we even confident that he finds a player like that? Because like I said, that seems like one of the better case scenarios, especially at the end of the first round. Now, let's dive into Brett Veach's draft history a little bit to see who he has gotten along the defensive line. So we'll start with 2018, which was his first draft. He traded up for Breeland Speaks in the second round. That was a bad miss. We know that. Breeland Speaks isn't even an NFL caliber player. Then there was Derek Nottie in the third round. Derek Nottie was a solid pick. He's a one-dimensional player who can stop the run. He's good at it, but he doesn't do much more than that. I wouldn't necessarily call it a hit, but it's an okay pick. 2019, he drafted Colin Saunders in the third round, the athletic defensive tackle out of Illinois. So far, after 3 seasons in the NFL, Colin Saunders hasn't done anything. That's just what it is. And that was his lone defensive line pick in the 2019 draft. 2020, he took Mike Dana in the 5th round. Dana is what you would consider a hit in the 5th round. But, I mean, looking at all of his defensive line picks, Mike Dana might be the best one. And Mike Dana in the 5th round isn't exactly a ringing endorsement. Like, that can't be your best pick, especially when you've invested multiple other top 100 picks in the defensive line. And then in 2021... he took Josh Kando in the 4th round, which was always going to be a project, but so far hasn't done anything in his NFL career. And one part that I didn't mention, but I feel like we need to acknowledge is even though in 2019 he didn't have that first round pick anymore, he traded one of them for Frank Clark. He traded draft capital for Frank Clark to get help on the defensive line. Looking back, the Frank Clark trade, not great for the Kansas City Chiefs. If you ask me what position Brett Veach has struggled most to address in his Chiefs career as a GM, honestly, I might say defensive line. I think he's done a good job addressing linebacker. He's done a good job finding good value secondary pieces and really fixed the safety position as well, signing Tyrann Mathieu, drafting Juan Thornhill. Receiver has been a strong point for the Chiefs for years now. Quarterback, obviously. Offensive line, the overhaul he did last year, sorry. And then there's defensive line, and they've been pretty lackluster since Veach's tenure began. 2019, they were just good enough to get the job done, and their sacks and their sack production has declined every year since then. So when people criticize me for saying, well, why don't you trust Brett Veach? Why don't you believe in Brett Veach? Or how could you be not confident in Brett Veach fixing this? I don't see how you couldn't be. He just hasn't done a great job addressing defensive line in the past, and this might be one of his toughest jobs to date. He does have the draft capital to get it done, but he has to hit on these picks, and it's not negotiable. He has to hit. Otherwise, the Tyreek Hill trade is going to look like a big mistake, and the Chiefs' defensive line is going to continue to suffer from lack of talent. I'm not saying it's impossible, though. I'm just saying I have questions, and I'm not sure I totally agree with the approach. But if he comes out of this draft with, and I'm just throwing out a hypothetical class, Boy Mafe, Travis Jones, and then maybe another edge later in the draft to double up, and then you bring Melvin Ingram back, I think that's a solid group, and you could sell me on that being an upgrade over last year. But the bar for being better than last year's group isn't very high to begin with, but at least you'd be getting younger and more athletic, and you'd still have Chris Jones, who's obviously been the best player on that defensive line for years now. So there's ways to get this done. There's a chance that the defensive line could still get that massive improvement that Brett Veach promised, and there's also a small chance that there could be someone out there, a proven player that Brett Veach is prepared to trade draft capital for, that we're not quite thinking of yet or that we don't expect. So that's pretty much all I got for this video, but I did want to share my concerns with you guys before we get to the draft. I feel like this has been a big topic of discussion as of recently, what's going to happen with the defensive line. But yeah, I want to know your guys' thoughts in the comments if you agree, disagree with me on anything. And all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this. And make sure you check out my work on ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com. I will see you all in the next one.